engagement is key to everything that we do.
So people actually feel ashamed of using the app?
I think private medical's lost its way a little bit.
Measuring it and then reporting on it, which is something that, frankly, a lot of the folks that we talk to find really difficult. Hey, I'm David, one of the founders here at Ben, and we're back here again with another episode of Friends with Benefits. Today, really excited to be speaking to Will Wintersmith, who is the head of reward at Halfords. Should be a really interesting conversation around especially managing a large, complex, diverse population and delivering benefits to deskless workers. Really looking forward to it. Well, thanks so much for joining us, right? I'm really excited to be having the conversation. I figured maybe we just start with a little bit of an introduction, right? The background for the audience, for the folks who don't know you, who you are, kind of what you do, what your journey's been.
Yeah, sure. So I'm currently the reward director for the Halfords Group. So I look after all our wonderful colleagues across all our different divisions. So some of the businesses you'll know quite well, such as the Halfords Retail and our auto centres, but we also have a number of different commercial divisions as well, that kind of focus on commercial tyres and other aspects as well. So me and the team look after about 13,500 people, primarily in the UK, but we also have small teams in Ireland and other parts of the world too. I've been in rewards now about 20 years.
Which seen a couple of things.
Slightly embarrassed to say. Yeah, it definitely feels a lot kind of shorter than that. Kind of time definitely flies.
Yeah.
But my background is primarily retail, with kind of I've dipped into financial services and other sectors too. But yeah, definitely my focus, broad reward, a lot of focus on compensation, particularly in PLC environments, and engaging with big populations, sometimes international, sometimes just UK too.
And any kind of big priorities or things that you guys are working on, all those? Yeah, interesting.
For us, it's always around employee engagement.
Right.
So engagement is key to everything that we do, whether that's kind of creating discretionary effort, because as with any business, you want happy colleagues to deliver great customer service, but also apply that discretionary effort. So particularly where we have a large number of on-call colleagues, that you want people to feel really engaged with what the business is doing, and then they get a really fair deal out of it. And that's really key for us at the moment. It's trying to find that right balance between we're asking what we ask from our colleagues, they're then getting a fair deal from us. So happy colleagues, happy customers, happy shareholders.
Yeah. And we'll obviously deep dive into a little bit more of the detail of like how to deliver that, because it's so obviously really challenging, right? But I guess before we kind of get into the meat and potatoes, we always like to start the podcast with a bit of sort of something that's in the news recently. And so one of the recent articles on employeebenefits.uk was mentioning that 1/3 of UK workers don't use their health benefits, and often because they don't know what's on offer or don't see it as relevant. I guess, why do you think that's the case? Why do you think most people miss out? It kind of goes back to what you were just talking about.
Yeah, it's a really interesting question, because it feels that health benefits has always been one of these kind of staples of a benefits package, that it's almost become that kind of health need that when colleagues, particularly senior colleagues, join a business, it's around what medical insurance do I get? Are my family covered, et cetera, et cetera. I think take-ups is a tricky thing. I think for me, it's really the barriers to access. So I think with any medical insurance is a lot like any benefit, that the real success is breaking down those kind of barriers to entry. And medical insurance in some ways, and some of the other benefits as well, such as cash plans, there's a really high barrier to entry, that what we really want to do is be able to pick up the phone or see a GP downstairs in your office, get straight help straight away, skip the queues with the NHS. However, often the realities are very different to that, especially as insurance premiums have skyrocketed with medical inflation and will continue to do so, that all companies are having to kind of rethink kind of what they offer, how they offer it, and what you create is a really disjointed employee journey. That people just want to go, do you know what, I want to attend my local hospital, phone up the consultant and book a consultancy to deal with my knee injury. I don't want to have to wait 3 weeks to see my GP, to then get referred, to then worry about whether the hospital I can go to is part of the list. And even with things like health cash plans as well, that you still need to access the treatment first to then get the cash. So I think it's a really valid concern, and a lot with anything, it's like it's those barriers to entry.
And I guess like it's really interesting. So when you say barriers to entry, like do you mean sort of just communication understanding, or is it more actually using like enrolling or kind of using the service, I guess, or both?
I think it's both.
Yeah.
I think the challenge we always have across any benefit is, one, there's that understanding, is two, the process. I think it's quite scary as well. That what you really want to do is when son, daughter, family member or yourself gets hurt playing football on a Saturday afternoon, you turn up at A&E and you go, do you know what, I just want to skip the queue, have an x-ray, I've got private medical insurance. Then you go, well, you can't contact anyone because it's a weekend.
Yeah.
Or you're out of hours. It doesn't cover emergency treatments. Actually, you still have to go through all the rigmaroles. And then you look at it and go, I'm now paying a huge amount of tax on a benefit that, am I really seeing any material benefit on this from a day-to-day basis? And I think that's tricky because whilst definitely we look at things like dental insurance and other insurances that kind of, they help you skip that. And we've really seen kind of that take up mature, where you go, what's a day-to-day problem where you can make employees' lives easier and cheaper?
Yeah.
And things like dental insurance really help with that. I think private medical's lost its way a little bit, where how much does it really help that kind of immediacy of need? And kind of that, it's all, as with all employee benefits, that kind of cost versus benefit evaluation that all employees do. And they look at it and go, what am I going to get out of this?
Yeah.
That's great. I might get £100 if I spend the night in a hospital. We'd all like it to be like a hotel.
Yeah.
But that doesn't guarantee me a private room that I can just rock up to my local Nuffield or Bupa hospital and go straight in, get the treatment. I still have to go through the process.
Yeah. It's a really interesting question, right? In terms of, so do people kind of appreciate, do people understand what is available at the first place, and then will they actually benefit from it? Because in reality, a private medical might be right for some people, but not right for others, right? Depending on what they need or want. But even I find that most people don't even understand the contents of it. And it might be related to things like you were just saying, right? The health insurance premium is kind of going back. Obviously, like the majority of the insurers and companies are like cutting back on all the benefits that are contained within a private medical, so to manage sort of cost pressures. So it's that balance, isn't it?
It is. And I think what we need to be doing is looking at how do we evolve the products as well. That when we look at kind of employee health needs with kind of the prevalence of mental health challenges, we've really got to go, how do we meet new employee needs? That gone are the days of, do you know what, it's just nice to skip an NHS queue and medical insurance is super cheap. And actually what we've got to start to think around is kind of how do we meet the needs of today's employees? And how do we look at kind of the pressures on the NHS and kind of what's really going to make a difference to colleagues' lives? And you see some of those products coming through, but it's as with anything, any kind of new product, it takes a little bit of time, and it takes a small number of very brave companies to really step up and go, do you know what, we're really going to invest in instant access for mental health treatment. And there's some fantastic businesses doing that.
Yeah, do you think it's evolving fast enough, kind of what the insurers and other folks are putting out there, or?
I don't think so. I think the other challenge is lots of noise. Yeah. There's a lot of noise in this space. So when we look at the less of the insured products and more of the support colleagues get, I think every insurance broker, every insurance provider, it feels like everyone's trying to offer some kind of well-being solution. And one of the challenges employers have and employers have is which one do you recommend? Yeah. Because what you don't want to be doing is providing a suite and go, here's 17 different well-being products. Colleagues who do sign up are getting direct emails from all the different providers saying, contact us. Yeah. If you have this problem, contact us. If you have this thing, contact us. And then they walk into the office and they see EAP providers and all these different benefits. And so it's really kind of how do we utilize communication? How can we help colleagues really kind of navigate the wealth of kind of information out there? And particularly with kind of growth of social media as well. There's a lot of information, good and bad, available. And so one of the challenges every employer has is that how do you balance the investment to really kind of generate a fantastic product for a colleague versus the cost of doing so, versus kind of does the colleague really need that?
And not to be a bit kind of cynical about it, but interesting in terms of you see a lot of the insurers or all these types of products just adding in these value-added services, which they do because, and most honestly, like not a lot of people engage with them, so they can do it in quite a cheap way to sort of bolster on their proposition, but they're not actually solving the underlying challenge, I find. And then it just, to your point, right, gets super confusing because I have an EAP with my life insurance, I have an EAP that's standalone, I have an EAP that has some things but not others. Who do I know what to go to or what to do, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's really hard because as an employer, it's how do you create that kind of menu of choice? Is that you'll have every big employer will have a number of different insurance solutions in place with different providers, and all of them will have add-on benefits that at one point they thought was a USP to them. And it's really as an employer, how do you start to select the different elements to go, well, the best in class for physical well-being is here, for mental health it's here, for financial well-being it's here. It almost becomes an impossible task, and I think that's the role technology has to play. Is how do we help colleagues navigate their unique needs and their unique situations to get them pointed in the right way. And it's really up to kind of companies to put that investment forward, because what we're not going to get is the investment coming through from the insurance firms, from the brokers like we used to see.
What do you think that is?
I think it's just the return that we've got to a very cost conscious society. And there's more pressure than anything on terms of budgets. And so what we're looking for is how do we meet a contractual requirement in the most cost-effective solution? And then how do we add on all the tertiary benefits in a cost-effective, sensible way? And just the return on investment from the providers just isn't there anymore. That no one sits there and looks at a product and go, it's worth spending another 15% on medical insurance because we get all of these additional benefits. I'm already paying for a flexible benefits provider. I'm already paying for a discount platform. I'm already paying for a communications platform, an intranet. All of this stuff is floating around for free. It becomes a much more of a colleague kind of self-serve environment, where we kind of go, look, we'll put out the options, we'll lay the menu, you pick what you need from it, rather than us kind of having that responsibility to guide colleagues to the right place at the right time for the answer that they're looking for.
I guess it goes back to sort of the next topic, right, to the conversation, which is I think you've also been doing a lot of work on traditional workplace benefits like cycle to work and gym memberships that, especially for the younger or part-time population, don't really sort of land, particularly for those, I think, in the environment where they're very conscious on the financial situation as well. So how do you think about designing benefits that are actually useful and meaningful in that context, I guess?
I think it comes back to my earlier point around how can you provide something that's appropriate for your colleague population. And I think what we see is a real diversification of needs throughout the employee base now. And so particularly with the legislation increases in national living wage, that are some of the kind of classic, we'll stick it all through salary sacrifice and give you loads of choice and
doesn't work anymore, right?
It doesn't work anymore. And people are looking at it and going, well, what value do I get from this? And equally, as employers, we have challenges. Well, equally at the same time, gyms are employers and have the same cost challenges. And so it's this classic situation that actually a colleague has almost better purchasing power when they walk into their local gym than an employer does trying to negotiate a corporate discount, because you get the corporate discount off the most expensive rate. Well, a colleague can walk in and go, do you know what, I'll just take a cheap discounted rate for single-use gym, and you pay less. And I think what happens is, as employers, we become very nervous around those kind of experiences. And particularly when we look at some of the more structured benefits around salary sacrifice cars, gym memberships, all the kind of bits and pieces that everyone used to throw into a flex benefits platform, technology. Well, why would you go and pay a £60 administration fee for technology when you could do it through Klarna for free? And so what we're not seeing is that kind of return to the colleague that says that actually what the company offers is the best value solutions. And as employers, we've got wise to it. And we don't want to be standing up in front of thousands of colleagues kind of going, isn't this wonderful? And they all turn to kind of look at you straight in the face and go, no, not really.
And I guess the challenges come with the relevance, and sort of what we see at least is like just the utilization, which boils down to, again, communications, relevance, and understanding, I suppose, of what is the actual benefit to them and how does it compare with, to your point, what they could get in the open market, right? Like, what's the point of offering something for a benefit if there's no tangible impact or value to the colleague, right?
Absolutely. And so I think what we've got to is that we've just got to pick where we want to play. So where we if you speak to a lot of colleagues in different businesses and you go, what's the one thing that you really value from working here? It'll be two things. It'll be one that will be something really silly that we never really thought about. Yeah. It'll be the fact I get chocolates on my birthday, or I get an extra day off on certain times of the year, and all of these kind of things that you kind of will always take you by surprise. And then secondly, it'll always be something that's specific to the business that you're offering. If you speak to the supermarket, it'll be the discount that they get in the supermarkets. Yeah. If you speak to our employees, they'll kind of give you out. It's great that we get 50% off servicing, or things like this. It'll be all of those kind of benefits that are unique to that company. Yeah. And then everything else becomes a bit of a noise. And so you've really got to look at it and go, if you really want to focus on physical well-being, if you think that gym membership is such a massive opportunity, you've got to decide as a company how much you're willing to invest. Because what you've got to do is kind of create that. You've got to bridge the gap between the standard generic discount offering that's going to be relatively minimal versus what the colleague can negotiate themselves to then create a compelling, actually it's still X amount cheaper every month to do it this way. So gone are the days where it's fantastic that you can add all this stuff on and you get it for free and the colleague gets a bit of a benefit. Actually, you've got to really kind of be really clear on your value proposition, what you want to support colleagues with, and really go after it hard.
Really, I think it's an important point, because what we see at least is a lot of, so most organizations where I talk to them, it's all based on benchmarking what other people are doing, and you end up with all these samey type of programs, right? So it's the same offering. It's the it's the core sort of the foundational benefits, as we call it, like the insurances, the retirement, which are obviously critically important. But then what, right? Like, you don't want to be the generic one that just offers the same thing that everybody else does. Then what's the point, right? We don't see that many sort of companies like actually trying to push things forward and innovating around the things that can be unique and specific to them. Which kind of leads me on to the next point, which is kind of one of the biggest challenges that we see is actually communicating. And again, nobody understands the things that are available and why it's beneficial. So I think you've taken a few sort of marketing inspired approaches, right? And like as a reward leader, you sort of have to be a marketer of these products.
Yeah, I think you have to draw on kind of external influences that as a reward expert, you've got to realize what you're good at and what you're not good at. Yeah. And we talk a lot about colleagues, and we talk about kind of their expectations, and you kind of have to reflect that back on yourself, that you have to know where your strengths are and where your weaknesses are. And where I've seen real value is where you kind of step back and go, do you know what? We're not the experts in communicating financial information. We're not the experts in in communicating well-being, etc. Let's speak to someone who is. And it's really when you start to draw on that external inspiration that you start to create real traction. And sometimes it's going back to basics and finding kind of what's the most effective way of communicating with your own colleague base, which sounds really crazy. But actually, it's sometimes drawing on an element of nostalgia or being disruptive in how you communicate creates the biggest impact. Now, of course, once you've done it once, you then need to reset the bar in terms of quality, and you go, actually, how do we do this? And so it's multi-channel, it's segmented, it's all the things that the colleagues are used to seeing on a consumer basis. They want bespoke recommendations when they shop. Yeah. They want fantastic user experience. And then suddenly when they switch that into a colleague world, because effectively as reward professionals, we're retailing to our colleagues that we're putting a portfolio of products in front of them and saying the best value way of buying this product is by taking it through the company. And whether that's kind of paying for it at a discounted rate or taking it and paying the tax on it. In an ideal world, getting it for free. But we're ultimately retailers to our own consumer base. And so when I talk to my own colleagues about things like cycle to work, which is very relevant for Halfords, and we communicate it internally, it's like our ambition here is to sell bikes. Yeah. So how do we sell? What's the best way to sell bikes to colleagues in the most structured way through a variety of different options?
If there are anybody's who are experts at that, it's you guys, right? So.
Well, we try to, but it's the same with kind of all the different benefits. It's kind of looking at that piece and just saying, do you know what? There's lots of inspiration in the market. And I always say to my team that, open your eyes, have a look around, see what's available. I walk through town sometimes, and it sounds a bit geeky, but you see kind of advertising, you go, do you know what? That's really cool. Yeah. That's a really innovative way of thinking about a product and bringing that kind of influence internally, that it's not a case of just throwing a portal up online and sending an email out and expecting massive amounts of engagement. people are bombarded with digital communication. And so what you've really got to do is, how does your communication really stand out? How can you really wow your colleagues, whether that's through benefits, whether through compensation? How can you put something in front of them that kind of creates that kind of wow moment and go, do you know what, I want to engage with this? Because as with anything, once you've got that kind of that initial engagement, then you're onto the right path.
And as ever with, again, the consumer product, like word of mouth is super powerful, right? So like you have colleagues who then speak, talk about the positive experience, and then the thing spreads, right? So kind of fomenting that as well, I think is super important.
And it goes both ways. I think you have to be really open to what you're not doing well as well. Yeah. So I'm really keen, and I say this to all the colleagues I work with, go, tell us what we're not getting right. Because what we want to do is stop the things that we're getting wrong, right? As well as be celebrating the things that we're getting right. So I say to my team, go, look, it's fantastic to get loads of really positive feedback, but there'll be some people that don't engage with it, or they go, this doesn't quite work for me. Yeah. And look, you can't design for 100, you have to design for the 99 or 95 or 80 in some cases. But actually, let's learn, let's continue to develop, let's try new things, and let's be afraid to fail. That you're not going to get everything right all the time. And what we just need to think around is that kind of, how do we get more things right than we get wrong? But what we do get wrong, we really focus on and make sure we learn from it.
And I guess like any tactical kind of advice for those that you seem being really successful when it comes to doing that, is in like marketing the products, especially to those that are historically difficult to access in terms of like the deskless workers. They might not have corporate email access and all devices and are on the road all the time. Yeah, anything that you've seen that is particularly successful? It's
creating disruptive moments. So I think looking back, where what you want to do is, obviously you want your colleagues focused on the work. Yeah. But at the same, but what happens is that a lot of communication gets lost in the communication, that when they're sitting at their desks or they're busy on the shop floors, they're focusing on serving the customers, they're focusing on the tasks in hand.
As they should be, right?
Yeah, absolutely. But it's kind of, how can you disrupt the moments where they're not so focused, where you create that kind of opportunity to be disruptive.
Interesting.
And some of the things that worked really well are where we've put stickers on the inside of fridges.
Yeah.
Where we've kind of used some of these kind of classic guerrilla marketing tactics that says, do you know what, actually, we're going to disrupt a moment where you're not automatically on pilot mode, or you're already you're creating those kind of opportunities to go, do you know what, I've got the headspace now to think about this for 15-30 seconds, and then really kind of engage with new ideas, and then what you've got to do is to meet their expectations. But it's fantastic to be disruptive, and yes, it's really cool to have catchy phrases stuck to the inside of windows and other bits and pieces, but then it's delivering on the expectation that you've created, and that's really where the kind of, you do create that success. It's looking at that and saying, well, you've hooked them, how do you then create that kind of reel them in and then deliver a very kind of smooth and seamless transaction experience.
I like that. Guerrilla marketing techniques for getting benefits out there.
Yeah. It is, but it's equally, it's doing things in a sensitive way. Yeah. That we've got to, that everything has to be done in partnership. That we'll all be aware of how hard it is, particularly in large businesses, to get messages out there. I know I never would advocate it, but sometimes asking for forgiveness rather than permission is a neat way. Yeah. But actually, it's, when we think around, it's building those relationships, making sure you can get the airtime, and being open and honest with conversations as well. That yes, the guerrilla stuff is great, but what people really want is honesty.
Yeah.
When you're in front of colleagues, when you're taking the opportunity to kind of speak to big chunks of your employee population, be open and honest with them. Try not to be kind of as polished. It's not meant to be a formal Q&A. It's not an AGM.
Yeah.
We don't have to rewrite every Q&A and kind of read it to the word. Actually be open, be honest, be human, and be happy to say, do you know what, actually this probably isn't right for you.
Yeah.
And there's a better way of doing this, or do you know what, I wouldn't bother.
Yeah, you're also then building trust, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because in reality, not everything is going to be accessible for everybody.
Yeah.
And people aren't stupid, and sometimes we try to overprotect colleagues in some ways, where we go, we can't do that because this population will be excluded.
Yeah.
It's like, well, they will be, but they're not dim. They won't sit there and look at it and go, oh, okay, that was really kind of aimed for us. Or that someone else might earn a little bit more than me, so therefore I can see how this has benefited. But you have to create the balance. So it's how do you kind of, again, go that kind of segmentation approach, is how do you make an offer compelling for lots of different people, because one offer is not going to fit. for everybody.
And it's quite interesting, and just kind of touching back on what you had said previously, like benefits is an interesting world, right? Like there's very few industries where companies are spending so much money, 10 to 15% of payroll in a lot of cases, investing into it, and then sort of having to push up the communications and things like that to get people to actually engage with the things they're spending money on. And I'm always kind of looking at, like, again, is that the right thing to be doing? So I don't know if like there's any sort of strategies that you've seen in terms of like directing the spend in the right way to make sure that it is the things that are going to make the biggest difference.
I think you need to be thinking about yourself as a business.
Yeah.
So you kind of you've got to look at your return on investment and be not afraid to go, do you know what, this hasn't worked, let's stop it. And actually let's try something new. You've got to be brave. You've got to kind of have an expected success rate to a lot of these things. And when you realize things are not being used, don't be afraid to take them out.
Yeah. I think a lot of organizations are scared, right? Because they're of the small parts of the population where they might, be really angry if they took something else. It's a tricky thing, isn't it?
It's really tricky, but people understand. Yeah. And I think if you're not seeing utilization, particularly for some benefits, you're gonna upset some number of people. But again, it goes back to the point, you design for most, not all.
Mm-hmm.
And if it isn't working and it is expensive, stop it. But if it is working, kind of invest in it. There's no kind of secret recipe for this. And I was a buyer at one point in time, and I had a fantastic idea. You put it out one Christmas, and it didn't sell. Like, not a single unit sold. I remember taking exactly the same product back, exactly the same promotion, back the following year. And my boss looked at me and went, "You're nuts." And I'm like, "But it's really well funded. Even if we don't sell it, we'll still make some money off it," which is the wrong thing to do. We'll still make some margin off it. We couldn't get enough of the damn things. Like, we sold out like within days as soon as we put it on the shelves, same stock levels, and it just was kind of it was a very generic product as well. So it wasn't kind of like right product at the right time. It was just something really generic. And
what made the difference?
Can't explain it. Got no idea. Still to this day, got absolutely no idea. Everyone was just like, "I can't believe this happened." So look, weird things will happen. Yeah. You can't expect results to always be the same. Some things will land really well. You can do the same thing and it just won't land the same. So look, keep innovating, keep thinking around. And actually, if it doesn't work, sometimes dust yourself off, try again. And sometimes it will work again.
And touching on the point there, you meant that, like, so beyond kind of utilization would be the other things that you would look at to know if something is actually delivering that ROI or measuring it and then reporting on it, which is something that, frankly, a lot of the folks that we talk to find really difficult.
It is really difficult. I think you have to speak to colleagues, because you are you're providing a consumer product. Every consumer business speaks to their customers, and as a reward team, you have to speak to your colleagues and your employees. You have to understand what's working, what's not. You have to really put yourself out there. You have to have those uncomfortable moments where you stand up in front of hundreds of people and go, "I want to hear your views. What's working, what's not." Own it, and really deliver on their expectations. Take the feedback. You can't white paper everything. That you can't sit there and go, I've read a paper, there's lots of great ideas in here, let's throw it out there and see what happens. You've got to really look at everything and go, is it right for us as a business? Is it right for us now? Culturally, is it right? Is the timing right?
Yeah.
Because you're competing with lots of different messages. That if you're doing something on pay review that may be quite limited from a budget restraint perspective, that's not the right time to throw out a new set of discounts or benefits. Because however great the narrative may be that go, do you know what, we're only going to give you a X% pay rise instead of Y that we've done previously, but look at this, you can make you can make your money go further with a load of discounts. They're like, they look at you and you're just like, no. Normally in a much more direct route, but it's those kind of elements where you kind of got to go, look, there's a right time and a right place for certain things, and while sometimes the intent is there, actually sometimes the messaging and the cultural impact that you have with what you're trying to do.
And putting, I think it is sometimes when we're talking through as well, especially benefits leaders who are really focused on the benefit side, like putting into context and everything else, right, in terms of what's going on, reward strategy, but also the business strategy and where it is and the moment in time, right? So because Otherwise, it can be quite tone deaf if you're just sort of doing that just in isolation. So,
Yeah,
absolutely.
And you've got to give optionality around bad news. That often you're the bearer of bad news from a benefits perspective, that things don't ever go down in price. And so it's kind of providing that optionality that says, look, you have an option. You can either accept the inflation in your tax liability or the contribution that you're making towards this, or alternatively, what we've found is an alternative, slightly diluted product that offers kind of a similar cost to you. And I think that's where kind of technology and AI really kind of comes to its forefront going forward, is that you've got to look at it from a colleague perspective and say, do you know what, some things you're going to have to suck up if you want to keep the same level of benefit and entitlement.
Yeah.
But actually, do you know what, there are alternatives and there's optionality around this kind of stuff.
Which leads us nicely into sort of a kind of final topic here that we want to talk about, and you can't get away from it, is like how AI, right, is reshaping sort of the role of reward, and what kind of benefits are you seeing from it? I guess like we just released a report on it, or like the real tangible impacts. I think the reality is most people are still a little bit scared trying to figure out how to use it, etc. I guess, what opportunities do you see, and have you played around with doing things?
We have played around. I think I was speaking to someone the other day, and they told me that AI is like trying to teach a toddler origami. That 1 minute you think they're pretty close to a swan, and then they decide actually they quite like the boat, and they're going to stick with the boat. And what I mean by that is that we've started to kind of play with things. Go, how can you use AI to really enhance the employee experience, either through cutting transaction times down, providing kind of that tier 1 level support, providing basic information. And I think what we've seen is that it's incredibly powerful, that when you get it right, but actually at the same time, you have to make sure all your ducks are properly aligned. Because whilst a lot of people will go, oh, it's scary and the robot's going to take over the world and all this kind of stuff, when anyone who's had any interaction with AI will know that the AI is a long way away from taking over the world. But what it does really mean is that we need to really think as we go forward as a reward function over what role does AI play, because it will exist. People will use AI for support, for answering questions. And it really starts for me to think, look, there's definite opportunities around how can you make processing simpler? How can we use AI to do things like national living wage checks? How can we start to help people through automated paperwork? How can we go from it being cycle to work, being you apply, you tell it what bike you want, it connects, it creates the delivery. You've got a little AI team in the background doing all the different activities, segmented in the right way, to really go, you click the button and within 24 hours your bike's fully built, ready for you to collect. And I think there's a world of opportunity, but what we've got to do, so anything, is to be brave with it and try it. I mean, we've had a play to see if we can use it for chatbots and other bits and pieces. And whilst it's great and it's really helpful for kind of basic processing things like holiday bookings and other bits like that, as soon as you kind of get into the benefits world, it becomes a bit tricky. The one thing we thought about is kind of really for leaders to think about how you structure your teams going forward and where does kind of AI opportunities come in. Because what we'll start to see is kind of new roles appearing in the market. So
what do you mean by that? As in, like,
so it's really interesting, because I think one thing that AI does do is it doesn't discriminate. It won't decide what's right or wrong. It'll base its decisions and the feedback it makes based on what you put into it. And so what we need to think around is, how do we give it the right information? And so whilst we've got some kind of classical analyst roles that most teams will have we really thought about having data librarians? So people that really look at it and go, well, how do I take all the different kind of elements of company policy, provider policy, and check? Because we started to try and train a bot to provide advice on dental insurance. And you ask it a question, and it's all going really, really well. And you get to that point where it looks a little bit like a boat, a couple more folds and you've got your crane. And then suddenly it starts to find itself in a bit of a loop where it can't decide whether it wants to refer to your policy, whether it's provider policy, the provider website. And so you ask it kind of all the wonderful questions around, what coverage do I get? How do I access it? Blah, blah, blah. And you get this wonderful response and go, oh, this is really, really good. And then it goes, and then you go, how much does it cost me a month? And it'll dig around and it'll find the answer and go, ask your HR department. Okay. And then you go back to it and you go, how much does it cost me? And then it'll turn around and go, £40 a month. You're like, well, this is really unhelpful. And so there's that real kind of thought from how do we ensure that the data that we're putting into our kind of, particularly when you're using closed models, is that the data that you're putting into it is really clean and consistent.
Yeah.
And you're avoiding any kind of situations where there's compromise in the information, compromise, or because kind of going back to my earlier point, experience is key. And I think when we look at kind of the opportunity of AI, the key thing is that I think the other piece is try not to overstretch yourself. That you can sit through a lot of conferences and a lot of kind of networking information. So they go, AI is going to do this, AI is going to do that, but it's around really kind of making sure that you're using the tools and you're kind of thinking around how do you have the right capabilities within your team to kind of take advantage of it, but also control it, because it creates a very different employee experience as soon as you start to automate some of the responses. And what we've found, particularly when we've increased communications, it's you get a much more detailed level of question back, and it's sort of thinking around kind of your support network, because in Reward we don't work in isolation. We work with our shared services team, we work with our business partners, and we work with our kind of operational colleagues, and it's really ensuring that everyone knows kind of what the right questions, because people will have much more detailed questions, because the more information you give them, the more they start to think around how do I leverage this information. They can start to put things into kind of ChatGPT and other AI tools, and they'll get lots more of, well, ask them about this this is an opportunity for you. And so people become kind of artificially smarter about these things, and you just got to be in a position where you're prepared to manage the additional complexity of what's coming through alongside that. Now it's great because of course colleagues are feel much more informed, but also it's how do you manage the misinformation that comes through as well. Because as I say, we've all used the tools. You go into Copilot and it'll give you, you ask it a question, it'll give you a load of information of the link where you found that information, but it doesn't know whether that's a quality link or not. So you could ask it about what's the national living wage going to be next month, and it pulls a thing from a doctor's website around pay changes. Like, well, that's probably not the best source of information for this. It may not be wrong, but that's kind of the piece where we've just got to be concerned that as people do use it more, we're prepared to respond to the enhanced level of knowledge or incorrect information that it's also providing at the same time.
And obviously there's a lot on the kind of the employee experience side, which in some cases create more of the sort of the danger as well, in terms of like putting things out there, colleagues asking questions and then getting the wrong responses potentially. I guess, like, are you seeing anything in terms of how you're making sort of your own teams and things more efficient kind of on delivering these types of things?
We're not quite there yet. I think what it does involve is a massive investment. So I think what we're looking at is what does the opportunities does it provide, and where does the ROI, and what do we need to invest in to make it happen? That it's incredibly powerful, but what you have to have is everything aligned, and that's not just your reward function. It may be your payroll function, it may be your finance function. It's all these different elements that you kind of go, actually, what is the broader impact of what we're trying to achieve, and what does that have on the kind of the teams outside of the area? Because it's all well and good to go, look at this wonderful thing that we've done, and then everyone turns around and go, bloody hell, you've made my life incredibly hard, even though you've made yours materially easier. So it's just being kind of prepared for that, and just being very conscious of what you're trying to achieve.
Yeah, what we're seeing as well sometimes is in the sort of, it's actually quite funny, like within sort of teams that are starting to play around with it, use it. Some people actually feel ashamed of using the AI. It's super funny, right? Some people are like, hey, it feels like you're cheating in some ways, so like they don't talk about it. And then the cultural transformation kind of doesn't happen, and people don't encourage or teach them to use it in the right way, right? Because just like any other tool, you need to learn how to use it effectively. And I think, again, people for some reason are a bit coy of like talking about, hey, I've been 5x more productive today because I've been able to use it, and they may or may not be there. But it's quite a funny thing where people feel like they're cheating.
And we definitely see that, and particularly I've sat in meetings where some quite terse comments have been made, where people are turning around and go, well, I wasn't really interested in what ChatGPT had to say about it, I'm more interested in your view. And everyone's gone, whoa, let's step this back a second, because the tools are incredibly powerful. And there's a place to use them, and there's this place where they just have to be used with a little bit of caution. And I think that the key thing is, like, how does it make kind of our lives easier? How do we improve the colleague experience? How does it improve our decision making? But that we're probably quite a long way away, because actually when we look at kind of the opportunity it does provide, we really need to think around the connectivity of systems and how does your ERP solution really stack up to deliver the information that you need to feed the beast that is AI, to give you the answers that you want.
Thanks for listening. That was a great conversation. And remember, if you haven't done so yet, please do subscribe on Spotify, YouTube, and Apple Podcasts.